Hudson Jet, the compact car that crashed before takeoff. In the early 1950s, Hudson Motors had a problem. America was going big, bigger cars, bigger fins, bigger dreams, and Hudson decided to do the opposite. They wanted to build a compact car that would be smart, efficient, and ahead of its time. The result? The Hudson Jet was a small car that managed to sink a big company. The Jet was supposed to be Hudson's savior, their chance to compete with Chevrolet and Ford's cheaper models. But instead of sleek innovation, what rolled out of the factory looked like the kind of car your accountant's dad would drive on his day off. It was short, stubby, and planed like someone described the car to a sketch artist over a bad phone connection. Hudson tried to market it as a jet on wheels, and fortunately, it neither looked nor moved like one. The design was dictated by executives, not engineers, particularly by Hudson's president, A. Barrett, who reportedly demanded a taller roof so women could wear hats comfortably while riding. That single decision ruined the entire look. What could have been sleek turned boxy, giving the Jet a profile like a loaf of bread with headlights. Mechanically, it wasn't awful. The 202 cubic inch inline 6 engine was reliable enough, and the car handled decently for its size. But the problem was simple. Nobody wanted a sensible compact in 1953. America wanted fins, flair, and flash, not a budget-conscious showbox that looked like it was afraid of attention. To make things worse, the Jet was overpriced. Ford Edsel, the $250 million oops. If cars could talk, the Ford Edsel would probably start by saying, "It seemed like a good idea at the time." Launched in 1957, the Edsel was meant to be the crown jewel of Ford's empire, the car that would define a new era of American luxury. Instead, it defined what failure looks like when you throw $250 million at it. Ford was convinced America needed something completely new. They spent $250 million developing the Edsel. That's over $2.5 billion today on marketing, showrooms, and hype. When the big reveal came, people expected a miracle. What they got looked like a confused horse with a mustache. That infamous vertical toilet seat grille is now legendary, but at the time it was just confusing. Ford designers wanted something bold, something to stand out on the highway. And fortunately, what they built stood out for all the wrong reasons. Some called it a jet intake. Others said it looked like a Buick that had eaten a lemon. The problems didn't stop there. Ford bragged about the Edsel's teletouch transmission, fancy push buttons mounted right in the steering wheel. Sounds futuristic, right? Until you tried to honk the horn and accidentally threw the car in reverse. It was a mechanic's nightmare and a driver's comedy sketch. Then came the timing. The Edsel launched right as the U.S. economy slowed in. 1958. People wanted small, affordable cars. Ford gave them a 19-foot chrome spaceship. It was like trying to sell diamond cufflinks during a factory strike. And oh, the marketing. Ford built an entire mythology around this car, secret teaser ads, mysterious slogans, even nationwide countdowns. When people finally saw the Edsel, their reaction wasn't awe. It was laughter. The name itself became shorthand for bad idea. Yugo GV, the car that made walking look luxurious. The Yugo GV, a car so bad it became a punchline the moment it rolled off the ship. The GV stood for great value, but owners quickly learned it really meant gets vacuumed because it breaks down so often. Born in the 1980s and imported from Yugoslavia, the Yugo was marketed as America's most affordable new car. For just under $4,000, you could drive something brand new. What the ads didn't mention was that you'd also get a free subscription to roadside assistance because you'd need it. The Yugo's story started with good intentions. A socialist nation wanted to prove it could build a car for the people, simple, practical, and cheap. The problem? It was too cheap. Everything about it screamed cost-cutting. The doors rattled, the dashboard shook, and the air vents didn't actually vent anything. Even the windshield wipers seemed confused about their purpose. Performance. Calling it slow would be generous. The 55 horsepower engine struggled so hard that merging onto a highway felt like an act of bravery. Owners often joked that it came with 2 speeds, stop and almost moving, going. Uphill required faith, momentum, and sometimes a push from friends. Reliability, legendary in the worst way. Reviewers said the Yugo could go from 0 to 60 and eventually, but from running to broken in seconds. Things broke spontaneously: the rear hatch, the handles, the carburetor, sometimes even the steering column. One critic famously said, "The Yugo isn't a car, it's a dare." But what really cemented its place in automotive infamy was its build quality. The car arrived at US dealerships missing parts, covered in rust, or refusing to start. Even dealers joked about it. Mechanics loved it though. They made a fortune fixing what should have never left the factory. DeLorean DMC-12, the dream car that time forgot. If cars could talk, the DeLorean DMC-12 would probably sigh and say, "I swear I'm more than just that Back to the Future car." Because behind those iconic gull-wing doors and that shiny, stainless steel body lies one of the most fascinating and disastrous stories in automotive history. The year was 1981. Former GM executive John DeLorean, a man with movie star hair and billionaire dreams, set out to build the world's most futuristic sports car. He wanted style, innovation, and a car that would make Ferrari drivers jealous. And at first glance, he nailed it. The DMC-12 looked like it had been teleported straight out of a sci-fi movie, low, sleek, and dressed in brushed metal armor that would never rust. It didn't even need paint. But then you turned the key, and that's when the dream stalled. Under the hood sat a 2.85-liter V6 engine producing a very supercar like 130 horsepower. That's right, all that flash. And it accelerated slower than most family sedans of the time. The ride felt heavy, the gearbox was clunky, and those gull-wing doors, gorgeous, yes, but in tight spaces. They turned getting out of the car into a full-body workout. Worse, the car's build quality was, well, questionable. Gaps between panels were big enough to rent out as apartments, and reliability was a constant nightmare. For a car that looked like the future, it spent a lot of time waiting for a mechanic in the present. Then came the real tragedy. John DeLorean's empire collapsed in spectacular fashion. His company was bleeding money. AMC Pacer, the fishbowl on wheels. If aliens visited Earth in the 1970s, they might have assumed the AMC Pacer was one of their own around. Glassy bubble gliding down the highway. Built by a species that loved visibility but hated logic. The Pacer wasn't just a car. It was a rolling experiment in how much weird you could fit into one vehicle before people started asking, why? The Pacer was born from a bold idea. Let's build the car of the future. And fortunately, AMC's definition of future looked like it came from a Jetsons cartoon. It was short, wide, and almost entirely made of glass, like someone inflated a regular car with a bicycle pump and called it revolutionary. At launch in 1975, AMC bragged about its wide stance for stability. In reality, it looked like a toad in sneakers. The doors were uneven, one was longer than the other so rear passengers could easily get in. But this design quirk only made it look lopsided, as if the car had given up halfway through being symmetrical. Driving it was an experience. The Pacer handled like a goldfish bowl full of soup, heavy, wobbly, and unpredictable. The engine struggled to move the wide body, and the huge glass canopy turned the interior into a greenhouse. Owners often joked that they didn't need a heater because the sun did the job too well. And yet, AMC tried. They marketed it as the first small wide car, perfect for modern America. The problem? Americans didn't want a small wide car, they wanted something that worked. By the time the Pacer hit the market, gas prices had spiked, and its thirsty 6-cylinder engine made it about as efficient as a barbecue grill. Cadillac Cimarron, the car that forgot it was a Cadillac. Oh, the Cadillac Cimarron. Born in 1982. The moment when America's luxury giant looked at a Chevrolet Cavalier and said, yeah, that'll do. It was supposed to be Cadillac's answer to the European luxury invasion. BMWs, Audis, and Marks were eating up the market. But instead of crafting a refined machine worthy of its crest, Cadillac grabbed a basic Chevy, added leather seats, a fancier badge, and called it a day. The Cimarron was the kind of car that looked like it came to a royal ball wearing Walmart shoes. It cost way more than it should have, but under the hood, it had a humble four-cylinder engine that struggled to outpace your grandma's knitting scooter. Dealers tried to sell it with words like elegance and European sophistication, but the public wasn't fooled. They saw right through the disguise. The Cimarron wasn't a luxury sedan, it was a Chevrolet Cavalier in a tuxedo, nervously trying to crash a five-star party. To make it worse, Cadillac's reputation took a beating. Loyal customers felt betrayed, and new buyers just left. Even GM executives later admitted it was a mistake. The Cimarron became a symbol, not of innovation, but of laziness dressed as ambition. Today, it's remembered as the car that nearly destroyed Cadillac's prestige. Proof that you can't just slap a luxury badge on mediocrity and call it classy. Morris Marina, Britain's rolling punchline. The Morris Marina, the car that Britain built when it wanted to prove that average could, in fact, be worse than bad. Launched in 1971, it was supposed to be the sensible family car of the decade. A simple, no-nonsense machine for the everyday driver. And fortunately, it ended up becoming the mechanical equivalent of a cup of cold tea, and dull, unreliable, and guaranteed to leave a bad taste in your mouth. The Marina was born from British Leyland's chaotic era, a time when strikes, rushed designs, and cost-cutting were more common than working wipers. Engineers were told to build something to rival the Ford Cortina. The problem? They didn't have the budget, the parts, or apparently, the enthusiasm. So, they stitched together whatever they could find. Ancient engines from the 1940s, suspension parts borrowed from the Morris Minor, and a body design that looked like someone had traced a cardboard box. The result was a car that drove like it resented you. Cornering, forget it. The Marina leaned so much you'd think it was trying to whisper a secret to the road. And reliability. Let's just say, the Marina treated functioning properly as more of a seasonal hobby. Russ loved it, the two were practically married. If you parked it near the sea, by morning you'd find it dissolving faster than an Alka-Seltzer tablet. Even Top Gear made the Marina famous again decades later, not for its heritage, but because they kept dropping pianos on it. Literally, that's how much of a joke it had become in British car culture. But here's the truly tragic part, the Marina actually sold pretty well. Over 1 million people bought it, not because they loved it, but because they had no better options. It was cheap, easy to fix when it broke, which was often, and looked boring enough not to offend anyone. Yet, over time, it became a national symbol of everything wrong with the British. Renault Dauphine, France's cute disaster. And now, the Renault Dauphine. A car that proved being cute doesn't save you from being terrible. Introduced in the mid-1950s, it was meant to be France's affordable people's car, small, stylish, and efficient. And at first, it worked. People adored its rounded shape and dainty personality. But once they drove it, the romance ended fast. The Dauphine had a rear-mounted 845cc engine that wheezed out about 30 horsepower. That's less than some modern lawnmowers. It took forever to reach 60 miles per hour, and once it did, steering it felt like trying to herd a drunk goat on roller skates. Its light frame made it tip-happy. Its brakes faded quicker than a croissant left in the sun. And its rust protection was, well, optional. The car's body would dissolve faster than sugar and coffee if you even looked at rain. In America, the Dauphine was imported as a budget-friendly European charm. But drivers quickly realized they'd bought a nightmare in a Barrett. Time magazine even named it one of the worst cars ever made. And yet, despite all that, it sold over 1 million units, proof that bad cars can still have great PR. Today, the Dauphine remains a tragic French love story, beautiful to look at, impossible to live with, and unforgettable in all the wrong ways. DeSoto Firedome, the car that burned itself out. The DeSoto Firedome, the car with a name that promised fire but delivered mostly smoke. It's one of those classic American tales where big dreams met bigger confusion, and somewhere in between, an entire brand went up in metaphorical flames. The DeSoto brand, owned by Chrysler, was once meant to fill the middle-class luxury gap of the sweet spot between the affordable Dodge and the posh Chrysler. And in 1952, when the Firedome rolled onto the scene, it was marketed like the next big thing in American motoring. Sleek, futuristic, and packing Chrysler's brand new Hemi V8 engine. It had all the makings of a hit. The name Firedome itself sounded like something NASA would drive to work. And yet, despite all the flash, the Firedome became a flaming symbol of how to mismanage a brand into extinction. On paper, the car wasn't terrible. It had power, chrome, and those glorious 1950s tailfins that could probably pick up radio signals from Mars. But DeSoto's real problem wasn't the car. It was everything around it. Chrysler kept changing what DeSoto was supposed to be. One year it was affordable luxury. The next year it was near premium. And then suddenly it was competing against its own siblings in the showroom. Customers didn't know what DeSoto stood for, and neither did Chrysler. Meanwhile, Chevrolet, Ford, and Buick were building cars people actually wanted. The Firedome became their cousin at the family reunion, shiny, loud, and trying too hard to fit in. To make things worse, by the mid-1950s, DeSoto's styling went from bold to bizarre. The cars got heavier, the designs more cluttered. Plymouth Fury, the car that looked possessed before it actually was. The Plymouth Fury was supposed to be Chrysler's golden boy, sleek, stylish, and full of forward-look confidence. Instead, it became the poster child for how too much ambition and too little quality control can turn a car into a cult horror story, literally. Before Stephen King turned it into the killer car Christine, the Fury already had a reputation for being, well, a little cursed. Debuting in 1956, the Plymouth Fury was marketed as a performance luxury coupe for the everyman, something between a Corvette and a Cadillac. It had the look, long fins, aggressive stance, and chrome so bright it could double as a mirror for shaving. But there was one small issue: it was built like an untested experiment. The Fury's aluminum trim would warp, its doors didn't align, and the push-button transmission loved playing pranks on its drivers. Owners joked that the car had a personality of its own, and usually a bad one. The early V8 engines were powerful, sure, but unreliable as a weather forecast. You could go from 0 to 60, or 0 to call a tow truck with equal probability. By the late 50s, Plymouth doubled down, giving the Fury even bigger fins and flashier styling. It looked like a spaceship ready for liftoff. But behind that futuristic facade was old-school chaos, poor wiring, sketchy suspension, and rust that set in faster than you could say made in Detroit. And then came pop culture's fatal blow. Stephen King's Christine. Once the movie hit theaters, the Fury's reputation was sealed. The car that once dreamed of being the pride of Plymouth was now a Hollywood villain, a haunted machine that ate mechanics for breakfast. Ironically, the real Fury didn't need evil spirits to cause trouble. It did that naturally.